Chapter 18. He was standing so still, glaring at them with such a frozen face, his eyes unmoving, unblinking, clenched fists held straight down at his sides, that at first Jenny thought he wasn't real. At first she thought it was a statue, some sort of mannequin made to look like Mr. Hagen. But as he opened his mouth to roar out his alarmed protest, she realized that he was real, and that she was caught. Mr. Hagen lunged forward as if to grab Jenny and Chuck, his face reddening with rage. But before he could make a sound, before he got more than a step or two, Mrs. Hagen walked into the room. Her mouth dropped open in surprise. "Jenny? Who?" Mr. Hagen stopped short. He was breathing heavily. "Hey, what's going on?" Eugene called. He and Laura walked out quickly from the den. "Uh-oh," Laura said, realizing at once what was happening. Her lipstick was smeared all over her chin. Mrs. Hagen ran immediately to her husband and put a hand on his shoulder, more to comfort him than restrain him. "It's okay, dear. It's okay," she said softly. "Jenny's friends will go home now. Then we'll have a quiet talk with Jenny about this." She didn't remove her hand until Mr. Hagen seemed to calm down a little. He took a step back. He was still glaring at Jenny. He hadn't said a word. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry," Jenny said, jumping to her feet. "My friend stopped by to keep me company, and—" "We were just going," Chuck said, motioning to Laura and Eugene. He looked really frightened of Mr. Hagen. They all did. Mr. Hagen looked truly scary, as if it was taking all of his power to keep himself under control. "I could drive Jenny home," Chuck said to Mrs. Hagen. "Yes," Jenny agreed quickly. "Save you a trip," she told Mr. Hagen. He didn't seem to hear her. "No, you three go on ahead," Mrs. Hagen said, still holding on to her husband's broad shoulder. "I think we'll want to have a little talk with Jenny first." "I'm really sorry," Chuck whispered to Jenny. "I'll wait for you at your house, okay?" She nodded, keeping her eyes on Mr. Hagen, who seems to be getting over his shock and rage. "Let's go up and check on Donnie," Mrs. Hagen suggested brightly to her husband. "Nothing terrible has happened here." He nodded. "I guess you're right." The first words he had said. He let his wife lead him to the stairs. She knows how to calm him down, Jenny thought. She's probably had to do this before. It's going to be okay. I'm going to be fired, but that's okay too. I didn't really want this babysitting job anymore. Her three friends, giving her looks of regret, hurried out the door. Jenny stood alone in the living room for a while, telling herself that nothing terrible had happened, that it was mostly embarrassing, that's all. No crime had been committed. She decided to get her coat from the upstairs closet so that she'd be ready for Mr. Hagen to take her home. She climbed the stairs and entered the Hagen's large bedroom. It was lit by a single lamp on a table beside their four-poster bed. The closet was against the far wall on the other side of the bed. "I'm in for a long lecture from Mr. Hagen," Jenny told herself. "But then at least I'll be out of here for good." She realized she'd miss Donnie, but she wouldn't miss anything else. Wow, did Mr. Hagen look mad. He was going to have to do something to control his temper. She slid open the closet door and searched for her down jacket among all the clothes. The closet smelled of Mrs. Hagen's perfume, strong and flowery. The hangers were all full. Jenny spotted her jacket on a high shelf above the hangers. Reaching up on tiptoe to pull it down, she knocked a cardboard shoebox off the shelf. The box hit the closet floor and bounced open, the lid flying onto Jenny's sneakers. Bending down to put the box back together, she was surprised to see that it was stuffed with newspaper clippings. She started to replace the lid, but then some headlines caught her eye. "Babysitter attack reported on East Side. Babysitter blamed in baby's drowning." Jenny felt a cold chill run down her back. Her hands shaking, her heart beginning to pound, she rifled through the clippings. "Police issue warnings after third babysitter attack. Babysitter admits to kidnapping child. Babysitter responsible for child's death." All of the neatly clipped articles were about babysitters, Jenny realized. Dozens and dozens of clippings. All about babysitters and the recent attacks on babysitters. It was too dark by the closet to read the clippings, and her hands were shaking too badly, but Jenny noticed that certain words had been circled in red. She picked up the box and pulled out a few clippings to see more clearly. The names. The babysitters' names had been circled in red marker. "No!" Jenny gasped. She dropped the box to the floor, the clippings scattering across the rug. "Mr. Hagen, why has he collected these? He must be crazy," she told herself. "I've got to get out of here." She picked up her jacket and started to turn away from the closet. "Oh!" she cried aloud when she realized Mr. Hagen was standing right behind her. Did he see the box of clippings? Did he see that she had discovered the box? "Ready to go home?" he asked, pulling on his black leather gloves. She couldn't tell. He looked very calm now. She stood up quickly and closed the closet door. Maybe he hadn't noticed that the box was down on the floor. It was pretty dark down there after all. "Ready?" he repeated. "No, it's so far for you to drive, Mr. Hagen, and you look so tired," she said, thinking frantically. "Why don't I take the bus tonight?" He shook his head no. She didn't want to ride with him. Not now. Not ever again. Not after seeing his collection of babysitter stories. The question repeated in her mind as she stared back at him in the dim light. Did he know she had seen the clippings? Had he seen the open box on the closet floor? She couldn't tell. "I won't hear of it, Jenny," he said, taking her coat out of her hands and helping her into it. His steel gray eyes burned into hers, revealing nothing. "I won't hear of it. You're coming with me." "Really, Mr. Hagen, I don't mind." He frowned, turned, and headed to the stairs. "Let's go," he said quietly. Chapter 19. "Good night, Jenny. See you Thursday," Mrs. Hagen called from Donnie's room. "Mike, don't lecture her all the way home." Jenny wanted to stop and call to her for help. "Please, don't make me ride with him," she wanted to say. "I think he's crazy. I saw the clippings. Please, don't make me ride home with him." But she stopped herself. "Good night, Mrs. Hagen," she called softly. She scolded herself for letting her imagination run away with her. What did the clippings mean anyway? Sure, Mr. Hagen was nervous and excitable, but he had always seemed very sweet underneath his nervousness, and he certainly did love his child. There were a lot of reasons why he might have kept those clippings, she told herself. It didn't necessarily mean he was a sicko. She was feeling a little better by the time she climbed into the front seat of the car. Mr. Hagen smiled at her as he closed her door. "I'm just completely exhausted," she thought. "I've got to calm down now. It's all over. All of the creepiness is over." "Quite a night, huh?" Mr. Hagen said, shaking his head as he climbed behind the wheel. "Quite a night." He backed down the drive and headed up Edgetown Lane. Jenny rested her head against the seat back and wearily closed her eyes. A loud click made her open them. Mr. Hagen had touched the control button and locked all the doors. Funny, Jenny thought, he'd never done that before. She settled back again, determined not to imagine any new terrors. There was nothing wrong with locking the car doors after all. In fact, it was considerate of him. She closed her eyes again. He was silent, not questioning her about her friends, not lecturing her. What was he waiting for? When she opened her eyes a few moments later, she didn't recognize where they were. "Is this Millertown Road?" she asked, peering out into the darkness. "No," he answered softly. She waited for him to tell her what road it was, but he drove on in silence. Outside the frosty window, there were no houses or stores. She made out an occasional barn and silo, and farmhouses as dark and silent as the fields that surrounded them. "Where are we? We seem to be heading out of town," she said, sitting straight up, no longer tired. He didn't say anything. He kept his eyes straight ahead on the flat, uncurving road. "Mr. Hagen, why are we going this way?" Her voice revealed her growing fear. "I'm going very fast," he said finally. "I wouldn't try anything if I were you." "What?" She wasn't sure she heard him correctly. He couldn't have said that. Could he? She leaned forward to look at the speedometer. He was doing 85. "Mr. Hagen, please." "I'm sorry you saw my clippings," he said, his eyes straight ahead, his voice even, emotionless, almost machine-like. "But it really doesn't matter." I didn't see anything," she lied. It didn't sound at all convincing. "Please, where are you taking me?" "I've got to get out of here," she thought. "But how?" "Please, Mr. Hagen," she said, forcing her voice down, forcing herself not to cry, not to scream. "Please take me home now." He drove on in silence, his large hands at the top of the wheel. He's crazy, she thought. He's crazy and he's out of control. Where is he taking me? What does he plan to do? I'm going to get away. I'm going to be okay. She repeated those words again and again, staring out the window at the shifting night shadows. They were way out of town now and heading farther out, roaring toward the empty flatlands where the fields ended, where no trees grew, where no one lived, where no one went unless they were on their way somewhere else. "Company's coming," Mr. Hagen whispered, staring straight ahead. talking to himself, smiling a strangely satisfied smile. "Don't worry. Company's coming." "It was you!" Jenny screamed. "Shut up," he yelled with sudden fury. He raised his left hand from the wheel and slapped her face, a stinging blow. The loud sound of it surprised her more than the slap itself. Pain shot up her head and down her neck. She was too hurt, too shocked, too frightened to scream. "I tried to warn you," he whispered, the hoarse whisper she had heard on the phone. "But now you'll get what's coming to you." "But I didn't do anything," Jenny cried. Her head throbbed like a giant toothache. She turned away and stared out the side window, as if not seeing him might make him disappear, might make this entire nightmare disappear. "I had a baby," Mr. Hagen said, still in that hoarse whisper, talking to himself now. "I had a baby, a little girl. She was only 2. But the babysitter wasn't quick enough. The babysitter wasn't smart enough. The babysitter wasn't good enough." Jenny didn't turn around, didn't reply, didn't react in any way. She remembered the girl in the photograph, the girl who looked just like Donnie. "My little girl died," Mr. Hagen said. "Now it's your turn." Her head hit the dashboard as he slammed on the brakes. The car squealed for several hundred yards, sliding over smooth ground, then finally stopped. When Jenny looked up, he was already pulling open the car door, already grabbing her, jerking her out of the car. "Let go," she said, just mouthing the words, an almost silent plea. He was too strong. There was no way she could fight him. He slapped her again, this time catching her jaw, snapping her head back. Then he grabbed her by the shoulders and shoved her in front of the car, into the bright cylinders of light from the headlights. "Move," he ordered, pushing her shoulders. She stumbled and started to fall, but he pulled her up. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the bright light. She was walking on solid rock now. 2 more steps, 3 more. She realized where he had taken her. It was the quarry. The old rock quarry, about 10 miles out of town. The quarry had been deserted for years. There wasn't a sound. There didn't seem to be air to breathe. The world was silent, except for their shoes moving over the hard rock surface as he pushed her toward the quarry. The headlights shot out in 2 straight beams. Then the light suddenly vanished. "No!" Jenny cried aloud. She realized why the light suddenly stopped. It stopped at the edge of the quarry, the edge of the deep, empty pit. "Move," Mr. Hagen repeated, giving her a hard shove that took her right to the edge, to where the light stopped. She looked down. It was a sheer drop, hundreds of feet down to jagged rocks below. "This is what you deserve, Jenny," he screamed. "I didn't kill any baby," Jenny cried. The look on Mr. Hagen's face was almost as terrifying as the thought of the quarry. It went beyond cold. It went beyond hatred. It went beyond inhuman. He looked like one of those hideous, undead monsters that stagger through the horror movies, eyes ablaze with fury, everything else about them zombie-like and dead. "I had a baby. This is what you deserve." He didn't move his lips when he talked. He didn't blink. "I didn't do anything," Jenny's voice came out in a desperate cry. "It's time to die." "No, Mr. Hagen, please." She knew he couldn't hear her. His face was no longer alive. Even his eyes had narrowed and nearly closed. It was as if he were retreating, pulling into himself, so that he wouldn't see what he was about to do to her. "No, please." "Goodbye, Jenny." "No. Think about Donnie. Think about—" "Do you want to jump now, or should I push you?" What? Was he giving her a choice? Was this her opportunity to stall? "Choose fast, Jenny. Jump or be pushed." "Mr. Hagen, listen to me." "Okay, that's your choice. You choose to be pushed." He raised his arms and moved forward, his eyes still dead, his face expressionless. Jenny backed up. She was on the very edge now. Her left heel rested on air. She nearly toppled backwards, down into the deep pit, onto the rocks so far below. Struggling to regain her balance, to get back on firm footing, she tried to inch forward, but he wouldn't let her. He came toward her slowly, preparing to push her back. A smile spread across his face. He was enjoying her fear. "Stop right there, Hagen." A man's voice from behind the car. Mr. Hagen spun around, startled. Jenny stared into the headlights. She couldn't see. The lights were blinding. She looked away, bright yellow circles following wherever she looked. "Who's there?" Mr. Hagen called, peering into the darkness. A man stepped in front of the headlights. Jenny blinked, trying to clear her eyes, trying to see who it was. She saw the plaid wool lumberjack shirt. Willers! What did he want? Did he want to kill her too? Willers raised a pistol in his hand. He moved a few steps closer. "What are you doing here?" Mr. Hagen shouted angrily. "Saving you from ruining your life," Willers shouted back, brandishing the pistol. Mr. Hagen threw back his head and laughed, a crazy, exaggerated laugh. Jenny tried to move away from the edge of the quarry, but he was still blocking her way. She felt dizzy. Her head was spinning. She didn't know how much longer she could stand with nothing but air behind her. "My life is already ruined," Mr. Hagen said bitterly. "I can't do anything about that, Hagen," Willers said, taking another cautious step forward. "But I can stop you from committing a murder." "No, you can't," Mr. Hagen told him. He lunged toward Jenny and gave her a hard push. Chapter 20. Jenny dodged to the left and collapsed to the ground. Mr. Hagen sailed over her and plunged over the quarry side. His scream cut through the air like a fading police siren. Then she heard a sickening crash, like a full carton of eggs hitting the sidewalk. Then silence. It happened so quickly it didn't seem real to her. She looked up, expecting him to still be there, standing over her, his small, gray eyes burning into hers with such insane hatred. But she saw only headlights. Then, 2 legs in front of the headlights, legs walking quickly toward her. Then Willer's dark, stubbled face was down low near hers. "Are you okay? Can you get up?" The words didn't seem to make any sense at first. The siren was still blaring in her ears. The short siren of Mr. Hagen's scream followed by the cracking sound, the sound of his body hitting the rocks below. What language was this man speaking? What was she doing out here on the edge of the old quarry in the middle of the night? And then suddenly, as Willers stared down at her, as he offered his hand to help her up, the words made sense. "Yes, I'm okay," she said, a little surprised that she could form words herself. What did she expect? Did she expect to be dead right now? Yes, that was it. She expected to be dead. But someone else was. Mr. Hagen was dead, down at the bottom of the quarry. She climbed to her feet. "I'm not hurt," she told Willers. Even in this strange, harsh light from the car headlights, he looked very shaken. I tried to stop him," he said, his voice trembling. He took Jenny's arm. She thought he was trying to help support her, but she quickly realized he wanted to lean on her. "I tried to stop him. I tried to save him." "There is nothing you could do," Jenny said softly, ignoring the smell of stale cigar smoke that clung to Willers' shirt. Jenny shivered. The air was cold and wet, and she was perspiring from the horror of her close call. Holding onto her arm, Willers began to lead her to his car, which was parked in the darkness behind Mr. Hagen's car. Along the way, he stopped and turned off Mr. Hagen's headlights, plunging them into total darkness. Jenny looked up to the sky. There was no moon. She made her way slowly, her eyes adjusting to the dark. She listened to the crunch of her sneakers over hard ground. She had never realized how good that sound could be, so solid, so real, so alive. "I should introduce myself," Willers said, stopping in front of his battered old Honda Civic. "You probably guessed that my name isn't Willers, and I'm not the next-door neighbor." "Yeah," Jenny said, shivering. She reached for the door handle. She wanted to get inside the car where it was warmer. "My name is Ferris, Lieutenant Ferris." "You're the policeman?" "That's right. I'm with the town police. I was assigned to this case." Can we get into the car?" Jenny stammered. "I'm not feeling too well." "Oh, sorry." He pulled open the door for her, and she collapsed into the tiny bucket seat. The car started reluctantly. Ferris let it warm up for a while, then pulled out onto the road. "Where are you taking me? The police station?" Jenny asked, shaking all over, unable to get warm. "No, I'm going to take you home," Ferris said. "I think you've had enough excitement for one night." How did you know he? "I've had Hagen's house staked out for a month, when the complaints started." "Complaints?" "Well, I should say attacks. The attacks on babysitters. I was assigned the case." Babysitters. Mr. Hagen had clippings about them all, Jenny said. Her head was spinning with images, frightening images. pictures of everything that had happened that night. Ferris looked up at her, surprised. Clippings? Up in his closet. Ferris shook his head. He was one of the main suspects right from the beginning. 2 years ago, his daughter died mysteriously. No one ever knew the cause. He went berserk. He blamed the babysitter who was taking care of her. It wasn't the girl's fault, but Hagen just went nuts. He attacked the girl, beat her up pretty badly. It went to court. He got off lightly because he had been in a disturbed emotional state. Then he moved to the other side of town and took a new job. When someone started beating up babysitters a few months ago, he was our prime suspect. When you chased after me at the bus stop, Jenny started, trying to get it clear, trying to clear her mind from the whirling, confused images. I tried to warn you, Ferris said, eyes on the road. But then when you ran, I changed my mind. I wanted to see what Hagen had planned. You used me? He was silent for a while. Yeah, I guess you could say that. But how could you do that to me? She cried, suddenly angry. Give me a break, he muttered, a low growl. Her question seemed to hurt him. This didn't turn out the way I hoped. Believe me. Jenny realized she shouldn't be angry at Ferris. He was just doing his job. Besides, he had saved her life. Her life. She was alive, and Mr. Hagen was lying crushed and crumpled at the bottom of the quarry. His poor family, she said, her voice a choked whisper. Poor everybody, Ferris said bitterly. He stopped the car, shifted into park, and pulled on the handbrake. Why are you stopping? Jenny asked suspiciously. He gave her a weary smile. You're home. She looked out. They were in her driveway. Ferris walked her to the door, then followed her inside, as Jenny's mother greeted her with a long, emotional hug. You're okay? Where were you? Chuck said he left the Hagens over an hour ago. I've been worried out of my head, Chuck said, appearing suddenly from the kitchen and putting his arm around Jenny. This is Lieutenant Ferris, Jenny said. It's all a long story, a long frightening story, but it's over. Could I have some tea? I can't stop shaking. As Mrs. Jeffers hurried to make tea, Ferris told them quickly what had happened. After asking Jenny at least a dozen times if she really was okay, her relieved mother hugged her again and, looking dazed, dropped down onto a kitchen chair. Such a sad story, she muttered, shaking her head. It's a very sad story, Ferris said softly, and it's going to get sadder. Now I have to go tell Mrs. Hagen what happened. He shook his head, then turned to Jenny. I'll pick you up tomorrow and bring you down to the police station to make a statement, okay? In the meantime, get some rest. After Ferris left, the three of them settled down in the warm kitchen, sitting at the bright yellow formica counter, drinking soothing hot tea with honey. Conversation was awkward. They were each thinking of what a close call Jenny had had that night. It's good to be here, Jenny said finally, sipping the fragrant tea. Yeah, Chuck agreed. This is a nice kitchen. I meant it's good to be alive, Jenny said, smiling at him. Oh, right, Chuck said, embarrassed. I have the feeling things are going to be good from now on, Jenny said, still looking at Chuck. I don't think I'll live in such a fantasy world anymore, letting my imagination run away with me all the time. The real world is interesting enough. A reality trip, Chuck said, smiling back at her. I guess there's something to be learned even in such a terrible tragedy, Mrs. Jeffers said. But the important thing is that you're safe. You're here. You're all right. Oh, I almost forgot. She put her mug down hard on the counter. Mrs. Milton? You know, down the block with the twins? She called tonight, Jenny. She wants to know if you can babysit next week. Jenny stared at her mother in disbelief. Mother, no, I don't think so. I think maybe I'll give it a miss. That's right, Chuck said, taking Jenny's hand. She has a steady babysitting job on Friday nights, Mrs. Jeffers. What? Jenny's mother looked very confused. From now on, she's babysitting me, Chuck said. Chuck was the only one who laughed. Thank you, Chuck, Jenny said. That was the perfect, dreadful joke to end a perfectly dreadful evening. She pulled him up from the counter, and, holding his hands tightly and leaning wearily against him, she walked him to the door to say good night. This has been a Nightfall Audiobooks production of The Babysitter by R.L. Stine, a point horror novel, Book 3. Hi, it's Chris again with Nightfall Audiobooks. Thank you very much for joining me for my production of The Babysitter by R.L. Stine. This was fun. Not too many characters, lots of exposition, lots of descriptions. I bought this book about a year ago, and I was sitting down to read it, and I was on my couch in my living room. I got to the point where Jenny was playing hide and seek with Donnie, and I'm like, man, this is a creepy book. And I never finished it. I put it on my shelf. I forgot about it. I'm glad I sat down and gave this a second go. It was pretty good. It was driving me nuts at the end there, though. You're in chapter like 16 and 17. The book has only got 20 chapters, and I'm going, where is the twist? What's going on? It's clearly not Chuck. And then Eugene shows up, and I'm like, well, it can't be him. He's not the guy going around with the babysitters. What's happening? And then it's revealed that Mr. Hagen went berserk because the babysitter was in charge when he lost his daughter, and he blamed her and went nuts, and now he wants to kill Jenny. And then Willers showed up, which is really the detective, Lieutenant Ferris. So that was a cool ending there. There's 3 more of these books. R.L. Stine loves this series inside his other series. The Point Horror series has The Babysitter, which is 4 books, and they will be your Halloween novel on Monday for the next 4 years. Plan on that, which is kind of cool. It gives me something to look forward to, something to schedule in and plan in and say, okay, my Halloween novel is at least one of the Babysitter novels. And it was fun. I liked it. I'm glad I did the story. What should I do next? I don't know. Send me a suggestion. nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. I'm also on YouTube at Nightfall Audiobooks. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Give me ideas on what I should be reading next. A lot of viewer suggestions led to some excellent books, like The Secret Bedroom. The Secret Bedroom is my favorite Fear Street novel that I had never read. It was wonderful. Please keep the suggestions coming. Any feedback is great. So tell your friends, tell your mom, tell whoever you think would like to listen to me tell them tales from R.L. Stine. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.